Well, good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate everybody joining us over the lunch hour. Hopefully, we'll uh, kind of give you a good update over the post 88th legislative session and what significant rule changes have taken place. Roughly within the past year, maybe a little bit more. Just kind of a reminder about today. What we're talking about today is going to be the post 88th legislative wrap up. Give you an idea about what bills passed, what didn't pass that impact the agency or the professions. We're also going to talk about rule changes that have taken place since our last Insights Over the Lunch Hour, which was all the way back in February of 2022, I believe. So it's been quite a while now since we've had one of these, and we've had quite a few rule changes that have taken place. Then also the board administrators will give you updates on what has taken place and as far as rule changes go in each of the respective boards. And then Tim and I and Patrick, the rest of us, we're going to talk about, give you an update on like the counseling compact, the social work compact, the ASWB national exam, EPPP part 2, kind of where those exams are, what's going on in those worlds. I'll give you a little update on the workforce survey and the data. We're going to talk a little bit about the status of criminal history fingerprinting, since that was a component of renewals. And then we're going to talk about telehealth across state or national borders, because we're still getting a lot of questions on that. How to maximize, Tim's going to teach you guys how to maximize the effectiveness of searching for rules and older versions of rules. He's got some information and kind of some stuff that I didn't even know about, to be honest with you. So I'm going to get him to share that with us. And then Tim's also going to go over just some helpful information on what you can find on the BHEC website and kind of how to navigate it. So with that, one of the things, well, I'll say before I get started, but the council has approved 1 hour continuing education credit for this program. Even if it goes more than an hour, you're just getting an hour. And for those of you that are joining us later on and watching this video on YouTube, I'm sorry, but it's only the folks that are in live watching the program live. They're the only ones that are going to get continuing education credit. So don't bother emailing, don't bother calling, because we're not going to give you a CE certificate because you say you watched it on YouTube. It's just a matter of us being able to track who does what, and the Zoom system allows us to do that live. Lastly, we will not be talking about applications or complaints. So, don't even bother asking about those, because we're not going to delve into your application or to a complaint that you've got pending or had pending, anything like that. So that's not the purpose of today's webinar, and you really wouldn't want us doing that anyway, candidly. So with that, let's get going. Just kind of give you brief introductions. My name is Daryl Spinks. I'm the executive director for BHEC, the Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council. We on the call here with us, we got Tim Spear. He's our director of operations. We've got Miss Sarah Fassholz. She is the board administrator for the MFT and social work boards. And then we've got Miss Christina DeLuna. She's the board admin for the LPC board. We've got Miss Diane Moore. She's the board admin for the psych board. And then we've got Patrick Hyde, who is our general counsel. We all kind of work together to keep each other on track here. So what we're going to do, I see we've got one hand raised right now. I'm going to ask everybody just hold off on raising your hands and asking questions. We've got the Q&A going. So if you've got a question, you can drop it in the Q&A, or if you want to ask it live later on, we're going to give you plenty of time to ask any questions that you want. And you're not limited to just asking questions about what we talk about here today. Other than an application or a complaint, it's free reign. You can ask us about anything you want to. So don't worry about being limited in that regard. All right, with that, I'm going to get going. So the 88th legislative session, the regular session, is over. We've now had 2 special sessions. There will be additional special sessions coming. However, none of the special sessions really impact the agency or the professions. And I don't think any of the special sessions coming in the future are going to do that either. I don't have any reason to think they will. But there were quite a few bills filed in the 88th legislature. In fact, I looked this morning just to confirm my numbers. I was tracking 236 bills. That's the most I've ever tracked in any legislative session, whether at psych board or at BHEC now. So it was an extremely busy session. I spent more time at the Capitol this session than I ever have before, waiting on hearings, just being called over there to serve as a resource witness, that kind of thing. Candidly, there are not a lot of bills that were passed that really directly impact the agency or the regulatory scheme that we have, our regulation over you as providers out there in the real world. So the actual list of bills that were passed and that impact us or you is that it's not going to be that long. We're going to talk about a lot of the big bills that were pending, or I guess, important from our perspective, didn't make it. They failed. And we'll talk a little bit about that and what those bills did so that we can make sure we, eliminate any kind of myths or misunderstandings about what is law or what isn't law. So first off, the thing I want to, and I'm going to try to put in the chat. I think I've got the settings to where I can send this to everyone. I'm going to send all of you if I can figure out how to do it. I'm going to send everybody a list of the bills. I've got a PDF portfolio set up and ready to go. And it's a list of the bills that I'm about to talk about so that you guys can look at it later on if you'd like. And that way you can have a better understanding of what I'm talking about. Here we go. All right, that should have just gone to everybody now. You ought to be able to open up the chat screen and download that. It's a PDF portfolio, so when you download it, make sure you download it to your hard drive and then open it up from there. Because if you just try to open it up in like the web browser or a tab on your web browser, it won't display correctly. You've got a PDF portfolio you need to download to your computer and then open it up from there. So just a little tip there. House Bill 63, which is going to be the first bill you'll see in that PDF portfolio that I just sent you, while it's not a bill that really impacts the profession directly, or it wasn't directed at the profession. Basically what it does is it eliminates the ability for anyone to file an anonymous report of child abuse. Historically, people have been able to file those anonymously, and there's policy reasons for that. But I happened to be sitting in the hearing when this bill was debated. It was a pretty interesting debate to listen to, but basically the legislature has now decided as a matter of policy that we do not want to allow anonymous reports of child abuse anymore. My guess is most providers weren't providing anonymous reports to begin with, because you'd want to show as a provider that you had done the mandatory reporting, and you can't do that with an anonymous report. So I seriously doubt that's going to impact any of you to begin with, but just in case, there it is. House Bill 139, again, doesn't impact.
Gerald,
yes.
they're saying that the chat is disabled on their end, so they can't access the document.
They can't access the document. Let's see.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, try it now, everyone. Let's see if that may not help. I don't know. Okay, they're getting it now.
Now they are, yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Now I will tell everybody right now, the way I've got the chat done, I've got everybody can chat with everybody, and because of that, y'all are going to overwhelm me, so I'm going to turn it off for me. I'm not going to be watching it. I'll just be watching, or Tim and I will just be watching the Q&A. Okay, so House Bill 139. Again, this is not going to be something that impacts the providers. It really impacts the agency. It's a bill that changes up what kind of notice we have to put in our preambles to a proposed rule. There's various components that have to go into a bill preamble. We have to do like cost analysis, small business impact analysis, rural impact analysis. Anytime we propose a rule, we've got to do all those types of analyses. Now they've added another component to that. Basically, we have to cite to whatever the statutory authority is that caused us to initiate that rulemaking procedure. And then if I think it's Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the elected official is still in office, if the elected official that authored the bill that gives us the authority to do the rulemaking is still in office, we have to notify him or her. of that proposed rulemaking. So that had been a provision it had showed up in bills for the past 3 or 4 legislative sessions, I noticed, but it never passed. It passed in a very similar form this time. It wasn't exactly like I've seen it in the past, but a little bit more watered down this time, I think, than what it had been in the past. But nevertheless, it doesn't impact any of you really, unless you're just pilfering through the preamble and you want to see, well, okay, well, what's the statutory authority for you to, to propose this rule? So that's one that impacts us. House Bill 2453. This one, it won't impact you right now, but I am hoping at some point in the future it impacts us all. It's a bill that gives us the authority to issue digital occupational licenses. In other words, that we don't have to issue paper-based licenses anymore. We can issue just a strictly digital license. Now, I know what everybody heard. Oh my gosh, they're going to issue digital license. That's not what I said. I said I would like to in the future, but it's in the future, and I don't know at what point in the future. So don't everybody send in your hate mail about how you don't want a digital license right now, because that's not where we're at. They've given us the authority to do it, but we're not there yet. We got other issues that we're working through right now. That's not a project that I'm even looking at taking on anytime in the near future. It would also require some pretty significant database changes, would be my guess. Like I say, we haven't even explored it to that extent, but my guess is it'll take some pretty significant database changes, and that's not something we can do very quickly. House Bill 3130 this was a Representative Guerra's bill. This was a confidentiality of if you're a domestic violence survivor, basically this bill says the Attorney General needs to develop a form that you can fill out and submit to agencies. And when you do that, the agencies will keep your personal information, your name and all your personal contact information confidential. Now, I will tell y'all that sounds good on the surface. And I understand where Representative Guerra is coming from on the bill. But one thing that I'm a little worried about once we implement it, and it's not a question of can we implement it, is we have to implement it. But if anybody is out there considering doing this once the AG develops the form, I want you to think about one thing. When you do this, we can't reveal your name to anybody. How are you going to get employment verifications, license verifications? How are you going to get it paneled for insurance? Because if those individuals reach out to us and say, hey, we're checking to see if Daryl Spinks is an LPC in the state of Texas, we're not going to be able to tell them that, we're not going to be able to say that we even have a Daryl Spinks licensed here. If they give us a license number and say, hey, is this license a valid license number? Is it active? Yeah, we can respond to that and say, yes, it is, but we can't confirm who the name is, and we certainly can't give out any of the contact information for that. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to shake out. I'm going to set up some meetings with my counterparts at other regulatory agencies, and we're going to see if we can come up with some sort of solution here that doesn't, you don't want to, you want to give full effect to the legislation that's passed. You don't want to take away from it. But at the same time, I'm not sure. I just don't want people thinking, oh yeah, I want to do that, and then they not realize the negative consequence that flows from that. So House Bill 4062 is Representative Harris. It's a mandated recording of child interviews and child custody evaluations. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but for those of you that do child custody evaluations out there, this is going to be a pretty significant change in your area of expertise. Up until now, or I guess up until September 1st, you don't have to do a audio-visual recording of a child that you're interviewing as part of a child custody evaluation. After September 1st, you are going to need to do that. And there's no exceptions to that. There has to be an audio visual recording under that bill. So that's something you're going to want to take a look at if you do custody evaluations. Again, that's House Bill 4062. So make sure you pay careful attention to that if you do custody evaluations. Now, it's important to remember that that bill applies only to custody evaluations. It doesn't apply to any other type of forensic evaluation or assessment or evaluations in general. So just keep that in mind for those of you that do those. House Bill 4123. Again, this is not something that affects any of you. Well, it does affect you, but you just don't know it probably. it's basically the statutory authority that gives us the ability to do DPS and FBI fingerprint background checks. Now, why am I telling you this? Since you all of you are like, well, I've already had that. Well, about 9 months ago, or I guess it's 9 months to a year ago, we got the U.S. Department of Justice reached out to basically all the states, Texas, and then every other state, and said, hey, all the statutory authority that you guys have been relying upon for the past 20 or 30 years to access DOJ's fingerprint background records, yeah, we no longer think that's sufficient. You're going to have to go back to the drawing board and fix it and basically change it up. That was a gigantic pain in the butt, and it was it scared us all, to be quite candid with you, because those of you that were with me at Psych Board, you knew we went through it at Psych Board. We got you all fingerprinted and you got you into RAPBAC while we were at Psych Board. And then when BHEC came along, everybody at the LPC, MFT, and social work boards, we got you to go through that as part of your renewal process. And that was all done under our existing authority. And that authority is what DOJ was saying. That's no longer valid for purposes of accessing the FBI's fingerprint criminal history records. So what really scared me there is if we didn't make the change, that DOJ was just going to say, okay, we're unsubscribing you to everybody. And then my fear was, once we got it changed, once we got the statutory authority updated, we'd have to go back and get everybody re-fingerprinted again. So this wasn't just unique to us. This was all the regulatory agencies in Texas and really across the country. So, but the legislature, Representative Guillen, got on top of it and constructed a bill. They drafted a bill, consulted with us, consulted with DOJ, and we got statutory authority or language that we can now use that we're confident, they're not going to pull the rug out from underneath us, and we can continue using the RAPBAC system. So again, doesn't impact y'all, except for the fact that you had to undergo that fingerprint background check as part of your renewal. But with the passage of that bill now, at least you don't have to go back and redo it again. They didn't jerk the rug out from underneath us. So the next bill that I wanted to mention to you all was SB 422, Senate Bill 422. This is a military licensing rule. They will almost always tinker with the military licensing rules every session. It's a very politically popular area for them to make changes in and usually expand licensing authority in. So in here, they've done that again. To understand the importance of this bill, it's important that you understand a recent federal law that passed. There's the Veterans Auto and Education Improvement Act of 2022. That doesn't sound anything like an occupational regulatory statute, but it is. Section 19 of that bill, if you Google that, Veterans Auto and Education Improvement Act of 2022, if you Google that bill and pull it up, and then you go down to section 19 of that bill, basically what it says is, if you're a military vet or you're a military spouse and you get transferred to a different jurisdiction from which you're licensed in, you can practice in that new jurisdiction. You just have to notify that jurisdiction. And once they verify that you are actively licensed and in good standing in your home state, you're good to go. You can practice without a license there. Now you're subject to their continuing education requirements if they want you to, but you don't need a license to practice in them. And basically what Senate Bill 422 is, it tries to align Texas state law with that new federal law. Texas already had a law that allowed military spouses to do that same thing, but it didn't allow the active military participants to do that, just the spouses. Now Senate Bill 422 expands that to active service members as well. Candidly, you're probably not going to see too many active service members use this because most of them are employed in the service and they're not going to hang a shingle out in private practice. And you don't need a license to be an Army psychologist or a Navy psychologist or LPC because of federal supremacy and all that. So I don't really think you'll see a lot of changes, but what you should pay attention to here is we're actually proposing a rule change under BHEC's rules. And it should be out for publication right now, out for public comment right now. You can look on our website under the rules section and you'll see it there. You can get a link to it. That rule, we try to merge both the requirements of state law and this new federal law so that we only have one rule and it encompasses both. So take a look at that rule if you're kind of interested to see what this bill does. Like I say, if you're already licensed, this isn't going to impact you. And to be honest with you, we only have like 12 people that have gone this route since the law was passed. And the reason being is I don't think insurance will reimburse you under this authority, under this. We used to issue a license. We're doing away with that, but I don't think insurance will reimburse you. And it doesn't seem to have benefited people maybe quite to the degree that everyone thought it would. In all honesty, you can probably just get fully licensed easier than it would be to fool with this and deal with the hassle of not being able to get reimbursed by insurance or get paneled under insurance. So anyway, it doesn't really, like I said, it doesn't really affect those of you that are already licensed. But if you've got any, if we're dealing with any prospective applicants out there or applicants now, you might want to take a look at that. The next bill I want to talk to you about is SB 510, and this was Senator Nichols. He sponsored this bill. This is a pretty big game changer. Up until passage of this bill, what we call your professional file, which is your application, that contains your application, all your supporting materials, all that is public information. That's always been public record. That changes with this. With Senate Bill 510, it now makes the application, it accepts the application from the Public Information Act. It allows us to keep your home address and telephone number and email address private so that we don't have to give that out. Email addresses were already pretty much confidential because of some separate laws or exceptions in the Public Information Act, but home addresses and whatnot are now confidential. We're currently working on some database changes that will allow you to, when you log into the online licensing system, that will allow you to say, hey, this is my home address, and that will tip us off to, hey, don't hand this out to anybody. That takes a little time to work through the database change process, but we should have that up and running by September 1st. But I know that's always been kind of a big gripe of licensees is, hey, I don't want my stuff handed out for various legitimate reasons. And so that's coming. But without that bill, we never could really stop people from asking for it because it's public information under the PIA. The next item is Senate Bill 1045. Again, this is not going to affect any of you directly. It won't even affect us directly unless we get sued or unless we have a disciplinary action that gets appealed. But basically, 1045 creates the 15th Court of Appeals. It's a brand new Court of Appeals with exclusive jurisdiction over appeals involving agencies. And I think it's going to handle it. I think its jurisdiction will include appeals of our disciplinary actions. So right now, if you get disciplined by the council, you can appeal that to district court. And then if the district court sides with us, you can appeal it up to the 3rd Court of Appeals here in Austin. But what the ledge has now said is we're creating a 15th court to handle all agency related matters. So I think probably any appeal to do with us will go to this new 15th Court of Appeals. And that's really, it's designed to handle administrative appeals is what it's designed for, or appeals involving administrative agencies. Next item is Senate Bill 1659. It just simply changes our sunset date from 2029 to 2033 to better align us with other Article 8 agencies. There's no reason to do it other than it's an efficiency type function. You don't want to be, it doesn't make sense to review BHEC and PUC during the same sunset review cycle. They're two totally different agencies that do totally different things. It's better to review, all your regulatory agencies together, occupational regulatory agencies. That way you can see, oh, this is working over here, it's not working over here. And they can kind of better cherry pick what the better processes and statutory authorities are. Lastly is Senate Bill 1893. It's just a ban on TikTok on state-owned devices. The only reason I mention this is because people may say, well, gosh, I'll start doing everything on TikTok because then they can't look at it. The BHEC or the council can't investigate it. And you would be wrong. There are exceptions. We can obviously access TikTok on a state-owned device if we have to as part of an investigation. And I've already authorized at least one of those that I can recall off the top of my head. So don't think you're going to evade investigation by just doing everything on TikTok or some other Chinese state-owned cloud service, if you will. So those are the items that have passed. And I mean, candidly, none of those are just barn burners of importance for y'all, except for maybe Senate Bill 510 and House Bill 3130. The rest of them are more important to us from more of an administrative or operational standpoint, but they're not really going to impact your day-to-day practice. The bills I'm fixing to talk about, which failed, would have had a lot more impact on all of y'all day to day. First off is House Bill 1167 by Representative Romero and his companion bill, Senate Bill 47 by Senator Zaffarini. We'll just call it 1167 because that was the bill that actually progressed through both chambers. 1167 was basically a licensure by endorsement bill. It created a pathway for out-of-state providers to come into licensure in Texas based upon, their good standing in their home state jurisdiction. What it did is it got a lot of, like, some of you, if you've ever watched an LPC board meeting, you'll notice that sometimes folks get hung up on that 3,000 hours of supervised experience. Well, they may come from a state that only requires 2,000, and now their supervisor's dead. They don't have access to their records. And then they come here and we're like, well, you can, we don't see but 2,000. You got to go do another 1,000 hours of supervised experience. They may be a 20-year veteran of the profession. That doesn't make a lot of sense. They're a known quantity to make them go back under supervision. This would have created a pathway for those folks to say, look, you've been licensed 2 years in this other jurisdiction. You're good to go, even though you don't meet the 3 hours. Long story short, and I won't get into all the politics of it, but that bill died. It died on the Senate floor. If it made it out of the Senate Health and Human, made it all the way through the House. It breezed through the House pretty quickly, made it over to Senate Health and Human Services, and made it out of Health and Human Services with some minor changes, but it died on the chamber floor on the last day that House bills could be heard. There wasn't anything in the bill in particular that killed it on the Senate floor. I don't think, just from watching it, and I don't have any special inside knowledge here. It's just based on what I watched. But I think it was just, they had so many other bills they were doing. It just didn't make the cut for probably bills that they had to get through on that night because it was the last night for them to do anything. House Bill 4075 was another Representative Romero bill. He's actually filed a couple of bills for the professions in the past 2 to 3 sessions. This was an MFT cleanup bill, but it dealt mainly with marriage and family therapy, but it also had a provision that was beneficial for all the professions. Right now, psychology is the only profession under BHEC on which I can enter into a reciprocity agreement with for another jurisdiction. None of the other professions have that. This bill would have changed that. It would have given me authority to enter into reciprocity agreements with, for LPCs, MFTs, and social workers. That it died over in the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. It never made it out of committee. That one didn't. So unlike 1167 that made it out of committee and then died on the Senate floor, this one just died in committee. It didn't make it out. So that one, I would like to have had that. Reciprocity is tough to get with other jurisdictions, but when you do get it, it really is handy. I mean, it's an expressway, and reciprocity is both ways. That means once we get it, all of you are then eligible for license over there in that jurisdiction. That's why I like it. It's not a one-way street. It's once I negotiate that deal, it's their folks can come here, but you can go there also. So that, for the professions that don't have a compact like psychology, that it's a big help. But anyway, we didn't get it. And we're going to talk a little bit later on, but House Bill 2557 by Representative Buckley was the counseling compact bill. It failed. And we'll talk a little bit about it later on. With that, I'm going to take a break and hand it over to Patrick. Patrick's going to talk to you about significant rule changes that have been adopted by BHEC since February of 2022. Patrick?
Sure. Some of the recent changes, they deal with 882.2 and 882.22. They go together because they make sort of the similar changes, but 882.2 allows new applications or new applicants to submit their NPDB reports to us electronically. Previously, it was required that all the National Practitioner Data Bank reports of any sort of disciplinary history you might have in another state. They had to be mailed in, and this rule change allows us to accept electronic reports. So that speeds up the application process. The 882.22 is for reinstatement applications. So if you previously had a license with us and you're reinstating that license, we can now accept that NPDB report electronically. The other part of 882.22 also clarified that reinstatements only apply to permanent licenses, not associate licenses or licenses that you have to get to then obtain a license, such as a license licensed professional counselor associate license. Next, the big change that I think everybody will notice is 885.1, and that's the fee rule. We did make some corrections, just sort of some typographical corrections, but the big change is starting September 1st of this year, some of the fees will be reduced, whether it's application or renewal fees. The governor had issued a request to all state agencies to try to lower fees for applications and renewals to 70% of the national average for the same type of license in another jurisdiction. So if your current application renewal fee was at that 70% number or below, your fee for your license did not change. But if it was above that, then starting September 1st, the new fee schedule will be implemented, and there will be a reduction in that particular renewal fee or initial application fee. The other two big changes, and they kind of go hand in hand, is 884.10 and 882.10. What 884.10 does is it reduces the amount of priority complaint rating system from 4 levels to 2, and there's only going to be a high level, which is a complaint that involves sexual misconduct or it involves imminent physical harm to the public. If your complaint involves those, it'll be rated as a 1, it'll be high priority, and then all other complaints will be rated as a 2. Why is that significant? That also impacts the rule 882.10, and that deals with processing applications that have a complaint. And so now going forward, what staff will do is if you are an applicant and you have a complaint pending against you, and it is a level 1 priority, your application may be held in abatement for up to 180 days while the complaint is being investigated, because it may be a basis for denying you that license you're seeking. But any other complaint that's not a priority 1 will not impact your license application. Your application will be processed in the normal route, but staff will still investigate the complaint, and it may be adjudicated at a later date. It just won't slow down your application process. So that should that may impact some people, because I know we had some people complaining that they did have complaints that ended up slowing down their application process that ultimately did get dismissed. And so hopefully this will not cause any of those sorts of problems going forward. But anyways, that sums up all the big major changes for the council rules since February 2022.
All right, thank you, sir. And by the way, on the fee rule, if everybody is wanting to see kind of what the fees are, that rule has already been proposed and adopted. You can go to the consolidated handbook, rule handbooks, or go onto the Secretary of State's website through the administrative code and look at it there. You can see what they are pre-September 1st of this year and September 1st and afterwards that year. So that's already in the law. We've already tested it on the database system. It's in fact for the renewals beginning, let's see, what is it? We've already opened up the renewals, the August renewals. So I think the system, we've already tested the system and it's already working. So we know it's been implemented, but if you're wanting to see what the rule change is, you can go look that up and see the various fees and how they've changed. All right, next up is going to be, I guess, Diane, you're going to tell us about the psychology rules.
Sure, I can do that.
You've had some big changes.
Yes, I have. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to share my screen. Am I able to share my screen, Daryl? Let's see.
Should be able to.
Okay. It's hard. It's hard when you don't have multiple screens. So. Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I don't know if it's in the right view mode. I can't. Okay, so basically, I'm gonna highlight these rule changes for the psychology board. The rules I'll go over are 463.10, 463.11, 63.8, 12.9, and 465.38. Okay, under the licensed psychologist rule, we removed the criteria for doctoral degrees conferred prior to January of 1979 to its own separate rule, which we have a new rule of 463.15. For 463.11, for supervised experience required for licensure as a psychologist, we did remove the gap rule, and we allow for petition to remediate any deficiencies of supervised experience, provided that all the conditions of subsection G of the rule has been met. For 463.8, a licensed psychological associate, we removed the gap requirement, and the changes that were implemented were to allow for a supervised experience that was earned under an internship practicum from a supervisor that's a licensed psychologist and or a licensed specialist in school psychology. So it'll allow to kind of bridge a gap to allow LSSPs opportunity to become a licensed psychological associate. It also extends grandfathering provision for degrees in psychology that began before August 31st of 2019. And it'll create a way to petition to remediate areas of deficiency. And lastly, it'll allow provisional licensed psychologists to count supervision obtained toward independent practice requirements as a LPA. We made changes to our temporary license rule 463.12, which removed the 24-hour pre-approval to use a temporary license. So now the license holder would report the hours that they provided the psychological services to Texas individual after the 30 days has passed or after the year of the license issuance, whichever would come first. They would be required to report that post meeting those requirements. For our licensed specialists in school psychology, the board made changes to just clarify that individuals that completed a NASS accredited program, that their training and internship met the requirements and are the same as the NASS approved programs. And this will also create a pathway for those that did not attain a specialist degree in school psychology to apply for license if they have a certificate of completion from a graduate level training course that is designed to train individuals from related disciplines in the practice of school psychology. Let's see. And lastly, I think this is our last one. Under 465.38, the psychological services for schools. This change will allow licensed specialists in school psychology to use the title school psychologist, which is also referenced in the education code. And the board did seek Attorney General opinion that was in favor of amendment of the rule change. This does not change the title of the license that is issued by the board. So the title for the license is still licensed specialist in school psychology, but we're hoping that the change to allow for these individuals to use the school psychologist title will help communicate their role and their duties in the community to avoid confusion of, the type of services that they can provide to our students in Texas. And that completes my update.
Thank you, Diane. And I just glanced at the chats. No, you don't have to tell us that you've been here from the start in the in the chat function. Zoom tracks how long when you logged in and how long you've been in it. So that's what I'll use to determine the CE. You don't have to tell us when you came in or when you're here. For those of you that are asking about the PDF materials, I will try to email it to those of you that are in attendance after this is over. I say try because depending on your email provider and your spam filters and all that it gets real tricky on whether or not I can actually send out emails with attachments to it. A lot of you will have built-in filters that keep me from doing that, but I'll try. And just
your spam and your junk folders.
Yeah, make sure you check your spam and your junk folders, folks, for your CE certificates and the email. I'll send out a separate email with the attachments. That way, if the attachment fouls it up, I don't want it fouling up your CE certificate, but just make sure you check those folders. All right. Christina, are you up next or is it Sarah?
Marriage and family therapy.
All right. Wow, Sarah.
I'll do my best. So for marriage and family therapy, I'll start with 801.43. This is professional representation. The MFT associate's name must be followed by the supervisor's name in all marketing materials, billing documents, websites, etc. For 801.74, we streamlined the approval process to sit for the Association of Marriage and Family Therapy Regulatory Board's national licensing exam. So when you complete the LMFT associate application and pay the fee, you don't have to submit all the documents that go with the associate license right away. The student or the applicant can simply attest to certain qualifications and receive the exam authorization code, and then at their leisure, or maybe not so much leisurely, but while they're preparing for the exam or after they've completed the exam, then they can submit the materials needed for the actual associate license. In 801.142, I got to get down to the bottom, under subsection 10, this allows staff to count supervised experience that was accrued under a qualifying doctoral program if there was a qualifying master's degree that was earned prior to the doctoral program. So under certain circumstances, staff can count experience that was accrued during a qualifying doctoral program. So that should help streamline some of the applicants or some of the associates meeting their supervised experience. In 801.142, 801.143, we codified the 40-hour supervisor training requirements. This is largely similar to rules that were already in the LPC rules, but please be aware the language here in M as in Mary 1, that the course must be taught by a graduate level licensee holding supervisor status issued by the council. That language is a little bit different from the other rules, in part because the MFT has about 4,000 some licensees, whilst social workers have about 25,000 licensees, and the LPCs have about 27,000 licensees. And the MFT board wanted there to be ample access to a person who wanted to get the training for supervisor status. So that's why it's a little bit broader in this set of rules for the marriage and family therapy. In 801.202, this changed the 2-year renewable license for the LMFT associate to a 5-year non-renewable license. This also meant that the MFT associate no longer needs to accrue continuing education for renewal because they cannot renew the associate license. It does not mean that their career is over if they don't get the supervised experience done within that 5-year period. They simply reapply for an associate license, that they just can't renew the license. So just wanted to clarify on that. And in 801.261, Daryl went over some of the continuing education rules. I just wanted to point out where it's different for MFT. For a marriage and family therapist supervisor, they must complete the jurisprudence exam every renewal period. And also if an MFT is providing telehealth services, they must complete 2 hours of continuing education in technology assisted services. And that's it for the marriage and family therapy rules.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that. I guess now, well, I'm looking at an agenda here. Yes, now we're on Christina.
Yes. All righty. So for LPC, the biggest thing I think that we saw this past year was related to the LPC associates. They are now able to own their own business and accept direct payment. To clarify that though, they cannot be in independent practice. So the LPC associate has to still be under an LPC board approved supervisor. That supervisor has to agree to all of the requirements that are outlined in rule. So that's very important. Even though they're an LPC supervisor, some of them may not be comfortable, supervising that LPC associate if they have their own private practice. So that's a big thing that LPC associates and supervisors need to communicate about. Also to clarify that for that LPC associate and the supervisor relationship, the possession and access, retention, control, maintenance, and destruction of client records are the responsibility of the person or entity that employs or contracts with the LPC associate. So if the associate is self-employed, so they have their own business, it's the responsibility of the LPC associate at that time related to those records. A big thing that the board also wanted to clarify is that if there's any liability related to that relationship between the LPC associate and the supervisor, it falls on both the LPC associate and the supervisor. So, assuming that there is a violation, there's a potential that the LPC board approved supervisor could also have actions filed against them related to the violation. With that being said, though, the it would be something related to the LPC supervisor knowing or should have known about the LPC associate doing something wrong related to professional counseling. So supervisors and associates, just make sure that you guys have a really good working relationship and go over rules together and what the expectations are between the relationship that you have. Otherwise, the other biggest thing that LPC worked on was related to the CE rules, as discussed previously. As Sarah noted again, for her board, one of her 2 boards, the jurisprudence exam is required at every renewal. That does count as 1 CE in ethics, but it is required at every renewal. And that's all I have for LPC.
All right. And Sarah, I guess it's back to you now.
It's back to me. So this is social work rules. We'll begin with 781.401. In the interest of streamlining, the board removed the 48 and 60-month maximums and the 5-year shelf life for supervised experience needed for the licensed clinical social worker, and also for the non-clinical down here in subsection B for the non-clinical independent practice recognition. In 781.404, they simplified the language regarding proportional supervisory sessions over the 3,000-hour and 24-month period. They also codified, let me find that for you. They also codified the requirements for the supervisor's training. And again, that's largely similar to what you see in the LPC rules and the MFT rules. But I'll bring to your attention that this line here on who may teach the course, the 40-hour supervisor training, is the language is slightly different. It must be taught by a licensed social worker holding both the appropriate license classification and the supervisor status. Bear in mind that there are different categories of social work license, the bachelor social work, master's social work, and clinical social work license. And we also have a few people who have a master's social work license with a non-clinical advanced practitioner specialty recognition. So if you are an LCSW, a clinical social worker, and you want to become a supervisor, you have to take the training course that's taught by a licensed clinical social worker with the supervisor status. You cannot take the course that's taught by a master social worker, for example. So just wanted to keep that in mind. Also, this rule was also streamlined to remove the 48-month and 60-month maximums and the 5-year shelf life for supervised experience needed for the clinical social worker and the non-clinical independent practice recognition. In 781.406, this was also to help streamline the processes in that it extended the window that the national exam is good for from 1 year to 2 years. So even before COVID, someone might have passed the national exam and then a life event, a newborn child or a catastrophic injury might have prevented them from completing their application after they passed the national exam. So now this window has been opened up to a 2-year window, and staff reports that very few people, if any, so far since this has been changed, have triggered that shelf life. So, and bear in mind, please, that after you pass the appropriate exam, you do still have to apply. I've gotten several inquiries where someone reports, hey, I passed 2 months ago, how come I don't have my license yet? And I find no record that they ever applied for the license. So it is a 2-step process. You got to come back and apply for the license. In 781.421, this stemmed from the COVID pandemic. And this allows the board in the future, when the governor declares a disaster, it allows the board some flexibility for some number of applicants that might have some hardship in getting the requirements for licensure completed. It does not waive anything outright, but it just gives the board to remedy that applicant's application, but I'll still provide reasonable assurance that we're protecting the public. In 781.21, oh, sorry. Did I miss it? There we go. In 780, oh, we did talk about that. So just bringing to your attention, 781.501 is where the requirements are for continuing education for social workers, and it must be directly related to the practice of social work. We kind of buried the lead in this set of rules because people are looking just here and they don't see that it has to be social work. But each of the set of rules for each of the boards has it in around subsection E number 1. Also want to let you know that on July 7th, the social work board discussed subsection H, and they've recommended that there be an addition added for field instructors, and that'll be presented to the council, I believe, when it meets on August 15th. And that's all I have for the social work rules.
All right. Thank you all very much. And I would encourage anybody that if you didn't catch it all or you didn't quite understand it now, just once we post the video, go back, listen to what it was, and then actually look up the rule and actually read it. I cannot stress enough the importance of actually reading these rules and not just relying upon what we tell you here. You really need to be reading it, parsing them out, and getting a good, firm understanding of what they're requiring of you before moving forward. Not everything we've talked about here today is going to impact everybody, but that continuing education will impact everybody. So I would really encourage everybody to study the rules for their profession and make sure you get a good grasp on it. The next thing I want to talk to you about is just kind of the update on compacts. Now, for those of you in psychology, you can go back to sleep or go back to watching Days of Your Lives, whatever it is you're doing, other than listening to me right now. For counselors and social workers and MFTs, though, I don't have any good news for you after this session. The social work, let me just start with it, or let me start with MFTs. There was no compact for marriage and family therapy folks. I'll just candidly speaking, I don't think there's going to be one. I don't see one coming in the foreseeable future, for just a variety of reasons, but I'm just not hopeful that one is going to ever materialize. There was some discussion by the Department of Defense to kind of fund and start working on one for MFT folks. The problem with the marriage and family therapy profession in that regard is that they're heavily concentrated in California. There's just untold numbers of them in California, and outside of California, we don't have a lot of numbers. And to sustain a compact, you can't have all your folks in just one state. If you do, there's no point in having a compact. You got to have some other significant pockets of licensee population before a compact really becomes sustainable. So I think that's going to cut against marriage and family therapy having a compact at any time in the foreseeable future until those numbers come up in other jurisdictions. I mean, honestly, I think probably one of the reasons why you saw that that federal law passed, the Auto Insurance Education Act of Veterans Education Act of 2022, is because it's meant to kind of get around some of those problems that you encounter when you don't have compacts or reciprocity available. So MFT folks, I'm sorry, I don't have any good news for you in that regard. And that's not anything the council or your board can fix. I'm just telling you right now, this what we're talking about now is straight up statutory stuff. So don't throw any hate mail at the council, at us, or at your board, because it's not their fault. Social work, we got it drafted. I was on both the technical advisory group and the drafting team for the social work licensure compact. We got it drafted. It was finalized, but it just wasn't really finalized in time for most states to do anything with it. Missouri has passed it. Missouri was the first state to adopt it, pass it. The governor signed it there. It's been introduced in probably 5 or 6 other states, I think. Sarah, you correct me if I'm wrong.
It's actually in 10.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So it's
but
growing pretty fast.
But the map is a little goofy, because they updated the map, but they miscolored some of their, I can't get to the map. There we go. So they have a map up at socialworkcompact.org, and when they changed the color for Missouri, because Missouri passed it, they changed Vermont and New Hampshire back to gray. And Kentucky has introduced legislation, and Utah has introduced legislation. So it is up to 10.
Okay.
With one of those 10 having passed the legislation.
Okay. And it takes 7 before it becomes activated. The only reason I know that is because that was something we had debated pretty heavily, was whether it was going to be 7 or 10, but I know it's 7 that have to join. So honestly, I suspect by this time next year, it's going to be up and running. The social work compact will be up and running. And then it'll just be up to the social workers here in Texas to decide whether or not they want to carry the water on that and take that, see if they can get that compact bill passed through the Texas legislature. So that's where we are on it. The counseling compact, Representative Buckley did the yeoman's work on that. I mean, he busted his tail. He and his chief of staff both did excellent jobs on that. TCA did a really good job on carrying the water there, and it stalled out. It made it through the House just fine, no problems on the House side that I remember. But when it hit the Senate side, and it wasn't just the counseling compact, all the compact bills except for the cosmetology and hairdressing, something like that, they all stalled out in the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. Not a single compact, but that one made it out. And then when the one made it out, the cosmetology compact, Governor Abbott vetoed it because we had joined a compact that wasn't set to even come alive until another 2 years. And so the governor was like, look, I'm not going to join something that I don't know what we don't know what we're committing ourselves to until this thing's up and running. We don't want to get married to it until we know what it's going to look like, how it's going to run and operate. So Governor Abbott was like, we can do this later, but we're not going to do this now and get ourselves into a big mess down the road. So he vetoed that. And then the rest of the bills just stayed in Senate Health and Human Services. I don't even think they got a hearing. I know the counseling compact didn't even get a hearing. So I don't know what to tell you, LPCs on that, LPC Associates. I'm not sure what to tell you on that. But it was y'all fought hard for it. You got a long ways. It's nothing to sneeze at that you made it through one chamber and made it into committee in the other. That's certainly, I mean, most bills, it takes 3 or 4 times, it seems like, before they actually go the distance. So to make it through one chamber and make it that far is a pretty big deal. But anyway, just so you know, it's dead. We'll have to come back in the 89th legislative session. I can't believe I'm even saying that, but I hadn't got the taste of the 88th out of my mouth yet. But anyway, we'll cross that bridge later on during the 89th. But I know TCA is probably already looking at it and working on it and kind of thinking about it. So we kind of give them some breathing space there. Future of the EPPP Part 2. The only reason I've got this and the ASWB exams on there is because there's been a lot of discussion and some consternation in those two professions, in both psychology and social work, over the national exams. There's been some concern in psychology of, what are we going to be, or newbies to the profession, are they going to be subjected to parts 1 and 2 of the EPPP? According to ASPPB, the EPPP will become a 2-part exam effective January 1st, 2026, and anybody will need to have taken and passed both before they will be considered to have passed the EPPP. The psychology board, certainly the council hasn't taken any action on it, but the psychology board, which is where something like this would have to initiate. Remember, anything to do with scope of practice has to initiate with your member board first, not the council. The council can't just willy-nilly take this stuff up on its own. So psych board hasn't done anything with it. They're still looking at it. There's a lot of concern on the part 2 about what is the actual need for the exam. What's it going to achieve? It was originally intended to replace the oral exam, but I know there's some serious discussion and concern about disparate impacts the exam has on minority applicants. And then there's just kind of a general question of what function is it serving? What added benefit do we get out of adding that exam? So all of that stuff is going to have to be answered. And that's not just a esoteric ivory tower question. When an exam costs $300-400 to do, it's a very real question to ask, because it serves as a barrier to entry into the profession. And that's not a dirty word. Everything we do is a barrier. I mean, our authority as a licensing agency is a barrier to entry into the profession. And it's supposed to be. We're supposed to keep out the charlatans, the snake oil salesmen, and just the ne'er-do-wells in the world. That's what we do. So don't view that as a dirty word or anything, as a barrier. But anyway, that's something we're struggling with here, and we're just going to have to kind of watch and see how that takes shape over the next 2 years. On the social work side, there's a lot of consternation and concern over the pass rates between different demographic groups on that exam, and whether that's a reflection of the exam or something else in society. There's a big debate going on right now. That it's not a debate that the social work board has to kind of deal with it, but it's not a problem or issue caused by the social work board. They're just kind of sucked into it and have to deal with it, ancillary, if you will. So just kind of the best thing I can do to tell you there is just watch those 2 boards, watch the agendas that come out. If you see a topic on that, you might want to chime in for that particular part of the discussion, just to kind of get an update or see what's going on with those 2 exams. If you're interested in that stuff, if you're already in the profession, you may not care. I don't know. But if you want to know what's going on, there it is. Workforce survey and data. First off, I want to tell everybody, thank you so much for participating to the level that you guys have on that workforce survey. I've actually I used that during the 88th legislative session. Even though I obviously didn't have everybody's information, but it is so incredibly handy and useful to have that kind of information, because when somebody says, well, what's the student loan debt look like for your folks? I can just punch it up now and go, well, 90% of them still say they're paying on a student loan right now. And they say, here's 25% of them owe $90,000 or more. I mean, it is so cool and handy to have that kind of information, because the Texas legislature is extremely data driven in their approach. They want to see numbers. Anytime you go over there and try to make an argument, they're like, well, what are your numbers? What's the data show on this? And it's just so handy to be able to pop that spreadsheet down and manipulate the data on it and go, well, here's what the LPCs are doing right now. Here's how many LPCs we have over the age of 70 practicing, the ages 50 to 60 practicing, that kind of stuff. It's incredibly beneficial. So I just want to tell everybody, thank you for participating in that. Don't stop participating just because you did it one time. I want to know, when we do this, we'll reset it again next year. I haven't decided if I'm going to do it annually or biannually, so that I capture just an entire renewal cycle. That's probably how I'm going to go, but I need to clear it with the council first. But, always make sure you take that thing and give me updated information, because I want a snapshot of where you are right now in life. It's not as useful to know where you were 5 years ago, because you may not have been planning on retiring. You may not have gotten sick. You may not have had kids or what have you before. And now life changes, and your outlook or your potential, your future changes. And so I kind of need to know that. And it's just very handy to present to the legislators in the governor's office and go, here's what the outlook is. Because I can tell you that I don't think anybody else is doing that. I mean, there are some, it's not workforce survey data really. There are some data pertaining to the workforces, but it's not to the level that we're collecting here. And this data is getting shared with HHSC. Actually, anybody can request it. So if any of you wanted it, you can just submit an email through that contact the admin executive leadership, and I can pull it down and send it to you. Now it will take, I'll tell you right now, it'll take some playing and tinkering around with to understand how to use those spreadsheets. And I don't have time to teach you how to do it. So it's going to be a self-taught adventure if you do it, but it is pretty handy whenever you, if you've ever got a question come up about that stuff, if you're doing a research project or whatever, I can hook you up with that. Status of criminal history fingerprinting. We should be done with that, unless you haven't done it and you're delinquent, or for whatever reason you got delayed in doing it. We should be, for the most part, done with that. And that's why that House Bill 4123 was so critical for us to get done, or get passed. I didn't want to have to redo all this, have all 80,000 of you go through and redo this again. That y'all were going to tar and feather me. I just knew if that bill didn't go through, and I wouldn't blame you one bit. But hopefully we're done with that. Now, I say we're done if you've done your fingerprints. If you haven't done your fingerprints, you can't point to this video and say, well, Spink said we're done. No, said if you did it. If you haven't done it, then you need to go get it done, because you're probably delinquent or in trouble in some form or fashion. So you better get on it and get it fixed. Telehealth across state and national borders. We still get a lot of questions on this. Tim, I'm going to let you take it over and kind of educate them on this.
Okay, thanks. Let me go ahead and share the screen here. All right. What we've got here is, this is the FAQ page for LPCs, but the FAQ pages for each profession start off the same way. The first 4 or 5 questions are about practice across state lines. One of the things that we get asked a lot is, if somebody is a resident of Texas but goes to another state, can I still practice on, can I, do a session with them while they're in another state because they're a resident here in Texas? Residency is not part of the equation. It does not matter whether somebody is a resident of Texas or not. If they are on Texas soil and you have a Texas license, you can practice with them. If they go out of state, you may be able to do practice, you may not, it depends. Because once you cross the state lines, at that point, you've gone into multiple jurisdictions having the possibility for authority, because you're in Texas and the client is not in Texas. So being in Texas, you have to have a license to practice in Texas. Some states allow people to receive practice from outside the state, some don't. Texas does not. So you will need to contact whatever jurisdiction that client is in to make sure that you can successfully and legally provide those services. So this FAQ provides various scenarios that are the most common. And I encourage you guys to give these a look-see because they truly do answer almost every question that we get. But again, the residency question is one that's important. It does not matter. It's like an emergency room. If somebody gets hurt here in Texas and goes to a Texas hospital, the doctor does not have to have a license in the state that that person is from to provide that service. So if somebody comes from another state into Texas, even though they're a resident of another state, they are within our jurisdiction at the time the services are provided, and a Texas license is needed. So each of these covers your various scenarios. One of the complicating issues is whether it involves military or federal ground. So if somebody is on an Army base or an Air Force base, that is not Texas soil, that is US soil. So you would have to contact the federal government to find out what could or couldn't be done. And those are just some of the little intricacies of practicing across state lines.
All right, I'm sure we'll have other questions in the follow-up here on that, but thanks, Tim, for that. What about, Tim, while we got you up here, talk to us a little bit. The last two items I've got are kind of on the agenda are to how do we maximize the effectiveness of our research on agency rules? And then what are some helpful information resources on our website that you can point out for us?
Let me share screen again. So on the behavioral health main site, we've got how-to user guides over here. And when you click on that, on the very first how-to user guides here, you've got how to look up past rules. And so I'll probably have to go to a different screen here. So this is the how-to document, and it gives you the link right here, which if you do a control, you can click on it and it will pop open the Texas Administrative Code, which looks like this particular screen. This is a screenshot of it. And then the best way to look up a rule is to just look up the agency name. And what it's going to do is it's going to give you a list of all of the chapters that exist for that particular profession. So in this one, we're looking up social because that's going to find us the social work board. And so if you were looking up psychology board, you would do it the same way. These percent signs are wildcard designators, meaning it's looking for anything with social in it somewhere. And so that will find it for you. What you do is you find the section that you're looking for, and this is to look up, like if we get this question a lot, the rules change. Where do I find where do I find what it used to be? And so that's one of the things that this particular function can help with. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the live version of it here. then I'm going to, I have to find it. Bear with me just a moment. I'm not real good with Zoom. Are we looking at the live picture, Daryl? Or is
Uh,
it still, it's still the pop-up?
No, we're still looking at your how-to.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Okay, so, we'll go ahead and here, so we've got the counselors, and then it'll be fine. And so then how it brings up all the 681s. And so this isn't all the rules. You may have to scroll through to see what you're looking for. So what I'm looking for here is about LPC Associates. So the LPC Associate license is right here. So you click on that, and this is the current rules of what's required for LPC Associate license. But they've got this little hyperlink here for historical, and when you click on that, it gives you what the rules were through an effective date range. For example, if you wanted to know what the rule was, what the rule said for December 31st of 2021, well, that's in between these two, so you would pick the one that was earlier, like this, and it will show you what that old rule was. And so I want to point this out because in this rule, it's going to say that, for example, an LPC intern, because they were called interns before they were associates, cannot accept direct payment. Well, that has changed. Now the current rule doesn't have this language anymore. And what's important about that is that rules are designed to, for the most part, tell you what you must do or what you can't do. So if we had rules that said everything that you could do, our rules would be longer than the New York phone book. So what happens a lot of times is we'll have a rule change like this where something like this gets taken out and people will want to know, well, where does it say I can do it? Well, that's the thing. It's not going to say you can do it because it's designed to tell you you either must do it or you can't do it. There's nothing that requires you to accept direct payment. There's nothing that requires you to have your own, to own your own practice, but there's nothing that prohibits it. So when we removed the prohibition, that created the ability to do it. But again, that's how this historical function works for the board rules. And it will be very helpful. And additionally, on our website for each profession, if you go to the board news section, that section doesn't get its content deleted. So you can scroll down to the very bottom and move back up and see each time rules are proposed, because that information is kept there. Back to you, Derek.
All right. Let me one thing I want to share with folks is I want to share with y'all the web page that we have created where you can view proposed rules and how you can submit public comment on those. We've really tried to simplify this process for everybody. Let's see here. Okay, so y'all are now, this is on, just go to BHEX homepage. Look over here in the right-hand column and you'll see proposed rule changes in the rulemaking process. Click on that link. And the speedy state government internet service that we have. 30 seconds later, here we are. We've designed this web page so that you can look and see what rules have been proposed and are out for public comment currently. So right now, that rule I spoke of earlier, 882.61, that deals with Senate Bill 422, that Auto Improvement in Veterans Education Act of 2022. You click on this link right here, it will actually take you to the proposed version of that rule, so you can see what the changes are. And if you want to look at the preamble for that rule that deals with all those components I talked about earlier about small business, micro business impact, rural impact, all that stuff, we lay all that out right here in the preamble. So that if you want to, if you're just bored and you need to put yourself to sleep, that's a great way to do it, by the way. I catch Patrick napping all the time after he's read a preamble. I'm just kidding. He's not here to defend himself, it doesn't look like. So there you can look at the proposed changes. Now we've also built a system now. One thing that we had some rules that generated just 1,000+ comments, and it has become really unwieldy to handle that volume of comments through just an email address where you just submit emails. So we've actually developed a system now where when you click on that submit public comment, it's going to load a form where you enter the information, and some of this is required, some of it is not. Then you can submit your public comment there, and it dumps it all into a spreadsheet for me so that I don't have to amalgamate or compile all the comments from separate emails. Now we've just got them in a separate, in a public comment form unique to that system. So that's more of a staff efficiency and board member efficiency technique there. But anyway, this is designed to make sure that you guys have access to whatever rules are actually proposed and out for public comment. Let you see what the changes are. You can see the preamble, and it creates one-stop shopping if you want to go ahead and submit a public comment on that. So hopefully we've received a lot of positive feedback on that. I tried to make it just as simple as I could. We don't have a fancy smancy system like the feds use. If you've ever submitted public comment for a federal agency, they've got like dedicated systems that are designed for this. I'm using a cheesy website and then a cheesy Microsoft Forms app to do the same thing without spending $300 million to the lowest bidder to give me that system. So make fun of me if you want, but it works, and hopefully it'll make y'all's life a little easier if you want to submit public comment. All right, with that, I think we ought to just open it up to questions and maybe take y'all's questions and see if we can dispel any myths or address any questions or concerns you got. So if you got a question, just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll unmute you.
Or create some new myths.
Yeah. There we go. All right, Ms. Vigil, do you have a question?
Yes, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly about the compact with MFTs. So according to the compacts, looks like are going to go through for the other licenses, but for MFTs, it's not going to go through because there's just not enough of us and it's concentrated in one area. Is that correct?
No, there isn't a compact for the MFTs at all.
Oh, okay. So I misunderstood.
Yeah, there is no compact for the MFTs. It hasn't even been drafted. DOD had contemplated it, but because of just some logistical concerns of how you would maintain a compact with a licensee population outside of California, as small as what we have, it just becomes impossible to do that, really. The others have not gone through for just myriad reasons, some of which I can't really say here, but no, there is no MFT compact. Make that clear.
Okay, so there wouldn't be anyone in the near future because of the concentration. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, this is just Daryl talking. I just don't see I don't see it being a viable option in the future. I mean, we've got 4,000 or 5,000 MFTs in Texas, and we're probably one of the bigger states outside of California with MFTs. California's got like 60,000. And then if you got states, with 4,000 outside of California, it becomes very difficult to, and if California doesn't want to join it, which they have shown a large degree of hesitancy to joining any other compact, it becomes almost impossible to fund one of these things because it costs, I mean, you're talking about 7 figures to set up the database needed to run a compact. Yeah, it's $1 million+ easy to set up the database. It's probably $2 or $3 million nowadays to set it up. But there are some grant funding you can get from HRSA to do that, but still, it's just very, very difficult for a profession who is concentrated almost exclusively in a state that doesn't like and play nice with the compacts.
Right.
Being California. So
okay. Thank you so much.
you bet. All right. Ms. Gonzalez, do you have a question?
Hi, yes, I have a question pertaining to the LPC change in which associates are now capable of accepting payment and having their own businesses. Are y'all familiar with any trainings for supervisors just to become more versed with the functionality of those rules and what's, you know, important to kind of just be aware of?
I'm not. I don't know of any other training out there that a supervisor could take. Tim, Christina, are y'all aware of anything?
No, it's incumbent upon the supervisor to develop that. There isn't any type of special training by DHEC for sure. But if there is something available on the private market, I'm not aware of it. That doesn't mean there isn't, just not aware of it.
Mhm.
I mean, I'll tell you, Ms. Gonzalez, just by virtue of you asking the question, that may kind of telegraph. I know we've got some folks from associations on here that may telegraph to them, hey, here's an opportunity to develop a training session.
Right.
Because there probably is a market for that.
Definitely. And I think that's kind of the biggest fear, because upon reading the rules and the regulations, it clearly states, you know, being cautious, especially whenever you're taking these supervision classes to become a supervisor, being well versed with it. You know, how can you supervise somebody who's doing that and then there's not a whole lot of research. This is brand new rules. So you want to, you know, tread carefully in that as well. And I know another question that I have is, obviously when it comes to insurance paneling, they only insurance unrestricted licenses. So obviously that does not include, you know, LPC associates. So in those
Right.
cases, I'm assuming that LPC associates can take payment that would be cash pay only.
Correct.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I know that the board no longer, you know, before there was different entities that you can go to get continued education courses that would have to be board approved. And now I think there's kind of been a dissolution of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, we no longer approve the CE providers, but we do, the CE rule itself sets out a list of entities or categories of entities that are quote unquote approved providers. So state, national associations, regional associations, hospitals, and everything on the list escapes me right now, but there's a kind of a list of broad categories that if your CE provider falls within that list, you know they're going to be an approved provider. So you don't need a stamp of approval on each one anymore. It's just kind of use your own judgment and look at it. Is this a TCA presentation? Then
Mhm.
then they're approved provider.
Right. And
Are
I
you-
guess going into that a little bit more deeper in regards to somebody being able to develop some type of training, you know, program regarding independent practices, or not independent practices, but LPC associates having their own practice. In doing that, how would one be certain that, you know, the board would approve that? You know, if you're giving those trainings and you're offering CEUs, maybe for other supervisors or LPCs, how can we ensure that that's going to be adequate for the board? It's going to be sufficient for board approval.
Well, you know, if you're just developing this on your own, you're going to have to run it. Unless you're a supervisor, you're going to have to run it and get it approved by one of those other approved providers.
Okay.
So in other words, you would have to get there's actually a couple of state associations in the counseling field, not just TCA, but you've got a couple out there that you could go to and ask for approval. If you're a supervisor, then you ought to know candidly, just being frank, you ought to know what is good, sound business practice when it comes to supervising these individuals. I mean, you're a supervisor, so you ought to know this stuff already. So a lot of this is kind of common sense. I think there's just a lot of, and I think people were so reliant upon the approval process for so long that maybe we haven't exercised those common sense muscles on this, maybe, and now we're getting back into it. So maybe we'll develop a little muscle memory here, but it really is not designed to be hard or scary. It's not designed to be a gotcha system. We are supposed to interpret those rules pretty liberally, and we do. Now, don't interpret liberal interpretation with ridiculous, but this is not a gotcha type system that we've developed here. So I don't want anybody worried about that.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else? All right. Dr. Lasser, I know you've got a question for us.
I do. Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for doing this. My question is, I think a lot of LSSPs are going to be interested in becoming LPAs. And this rule change that you discussed with supervision from an LSSP is going to be a game changer. I'm going to get questions about this. Is there anything else they need to be aware of besides taking the EPPP and jurisprudence and making sure they have the supervision?
Make sure that supervision is within the training program. We've had 2 or 3 applicants the last board meeting where their supervision was outside of their training program, and they were trying to figure out how can we shoehorn that in. It doesn't work. It's got to be within the training program. In other words, they can't cure it after the fact. And I guess 2, you want to make sure they run down that coursework, make sure they've got all those coursework requirements. Those are the only 2 landmines that I could see.
Thank you.
Patrick, Diane, y'all have anything else you want to add?
No, that was what I was gonna say, is the coursework doesn't match up on the 2 rules, so you need to make sure that you have the coursework for the LPA.
Yeah. And Patrick, I'm right on that 6 hours. It has to be, you can't Frankenstein that, right?
It has to be in the program. It's supposed to be part of that program.
And folks, whenever we say you'll hear Patrick and I use that term Frankenstein. What we're meaning is cobble it together, fix it after the fact. Now we do have that remediation rule. Will that, Patrick, if somebody cure the 6-hour deficiency through the remediation rule if it gets adopted?
I know you can cure some of the problems. Let me double check that. I'm not sure.
Okay, we'll move on and you can touch base with it. All right, John, that answer your question? Patrick will look up that answer for that question I just had and holler back
Yes.
at y'all.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you so much.
You bet. Ms. Formby, do you have a question for us?
Thanks. So this is regarding the EPPP for psychology licensure.
Mhm.
So you said we'll have 2 parts beginning 2026. Can you explain again how that process of determining what the content will be and how that's being researched?
I'll tell you, I don't even want to try right now, and I'm not trying to evade the question, but we don't yet know. ASPPB has told us, and they actually own the EPPP. ASPPB has said that the EPPP will become a 2-part exam effective January 1st of 2026, and you have to have taken and passed both parts to receive a passing score on the EPPP part or EPPP. The real question right now for the board, if you watch any of the board meetings in the past, the issue is how can we require somebody to take that part 2 if we can't? We're struggling with trying to find a justification for needing it, is what I'm just trying to say. And it's not here's the problem. It's not the board that's making this decision. It's not the council that's making this decision. The entity that owns the exam has said this will now be a 2-part exam. We use that exam as the national exam, as does every other jurisdiction in the US and Canada. Well, except for Quebec, I don't think they do. But anyway, we're kind of stuck in a tight spot because it's not our exam. We don't want to develop our own exam because it costs millions of dollars. And yet we don't really, to what degree can we tell the entity that owns it, hey, you can't add on an additional part to that, or you can't expand the exam. I don't know what to tell you right now. I think the best thing to do is we're just going to have to kind of sit and watch this debate unfold a little bit more. It's not happening tomorrow. It won't be till 2026. But I think we need to wait a little bit more before we start jumping to any kind of take action type posturing. it's just one of those things we need to be watching it right now
Right.
and watching how the board tackles it. I'm really curious to see how other jurisdictions approach it as the time draws near. In particular, I'm curious to see how like California, New York, and Florida, because we're the big four: Texas, California, New York, and Florida are the big four in that. We probably house the most licensees out. We outnumber all the other states combined in terms of licensees. So I'm really curious to see what those other states do in this regard. So it's just too early to say right now, Doc, really. I'm sorry.
So sit tight, basically.
Sit tight and let's watch,
Okay.
because I'm in the same position y'all are in. I just don't know which way the wind's going to go on this thing. And I'm trying to gauge what's the best, where do we need to be in the best position come January 1st, 2026? Is it, do we just bite the bullet and accept it? Do we knuckle down and say, look, we can't do it because part of the council's mission is to say, well, you can't impose barriers on entry into a profession unless you can show some kind of good regulatory justification. And remember, we got to get stuff approved by the governor's office too. Governor Abbott is going to look at stuff from an anti-competitive aspect. He's got that regulatory compliance division. So we're going to have to justify this change to him. And I mean, just what are you going to, you sit in my shoes for a minute, you're going to go in there and say, well, look, they've said this is now part of the exam. It's going to increase the cost by $300 or $400. He's going to ask you, well, what, do you need it? Is there some harm that you're trying to prevent from it? Well, no, I can't point to anything. Okay, so why are we doing this? I mean, it's a legit question.
Right.
And
Yes.
I don't know how that's going to shake out. So we're just kind of sitting and waiting right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You bet.
Carol, to answer Dr. Lasser's previous question, yes, the remediation would allow for the 6 hours of supervised experience if they don't have all of that. And it also would cover the coursework requirement.
Okay.
The note is that rule has actually not been adopted yet. It's going to the council in August for adoption. So
Yeah. And don't everybody count your chickens before they hatch on that. Just don't submit your application in hopes that thing's going to pass. Wait till it passes before you actually do anything on it, before you move on it. So I think it will, but that's just Daryl sitting here thinking. And my wife has proved me time and time again that I've been wrong when I've thought something. So be careful there. Ms. Vargas, do you have a question for us?
Yes, thank you. Hi there. So this is about this question's about the new rule for the MFT associates. And I do apologize about how technical this question is. But I really want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly because I get this question a lot from my associates. So am I understanding correctly that the associate has to list my name as a supervisor every single time they list their own name? And an example of why I'm asking that question is like in Psychology Today, they can't really list that like in their profile name or on their informed consent. So they have to write it every single time, like paragraph, even though it's on the page clearly, like that kind of technicality.
The language is where the LMFT associate name appears. So.
Okay.
I think as long as it appears, on the somewhere's in their Psychology Today profile, doesn't have to appear like right under their name. I mean, we're not going to ding somebody if there's not a field under there for that, but as long as it's in that profile somewhere to indicate that, yes, they are supervised.
Okay, so that's
fine.
kind of what I've been instructing, as long as it's clear and as long as it's right there near their name somewhere, even if they mention their name more than once. I didn't know how technical that was, but I got that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see. All right. Ms. Mead, did you have a question for us? Stephanie Mead?
Actually, it's been answered by Tim. I think the big thing can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. I think the big thing I'm running into is as people, especially within the social work field, are looking to finish their clinical licensure. I'm called upon often, especially using from Midland Rape Crisis Center to everyone knows the social work, we're very much linked into community organizations that are supporting our clients. And so with that, for example, school system, all these things I've been working with outside of my clinical hours to our clinical direct practice. I'm just curious, can those kind of things go toward clinical licensure hours, that 3,000 hour license requirement? Because there's a lot of advocacy work, especially in smaller rural towns, of educating people about ACE scores and things like that, that are physicians, everything that aren't necessarily direct with client, but is very much advocacy work that is happening. And I can obviously track those in detail, but what are you seeing there as far as that kind of advocacy work for the social worker and clinical hours?
Sarah, Tim, I'm gonna have to kind of defer to y'all on this one. I'm not sure I know enough
Well,
about.
it's the clinical social work is, at least where this is considered, is the delivery of psychotherapy. So just because, you know, you're involved in advocacy or other non-clinical social work, that isn't going to be something that can be used to, it can't be used to meet the hours that are required to be clinical. So you have to do the clinical hours, and it has to be part of your supervision plan. It has to be, you know, your LCSW supervisor has to be in on it, all of that kind of stuff. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's where it's kind of different for social work than it is for the other professions. Social workers who are looking to become clinical social workers are already licensed as a full licensee, as an LMSW. Whereas for LPC, they're an associate, or for MFT, they're an associate. So they're kind of attached to another practitioner. Whereas if a LMSW decides that they don't want to go for the clinical social work anymore, they still have their LMSW license and can do their LMSW work. So that's why it's a little bit apples and oranges between those professions. But it has to, for us to be able to count those hours, it has to be clinical social work, and it has to be part of the supervision plan, and it has to be supervised by the LCSWS.
Okay, perfect. And I know, for example, I know we're doing very micro questions here. Supervisor has approved it. He's seen the direct clinical work of talking to physicians, educating them on adverse childhood experiences. But you're saying even with supervisor approval, it's not likely going to pass when presented for submission for the licensure.
The supervisor should be aware that it's what they're talking about is clinical social work. So if it meets the definition of clinical social work, then it will be accepted.
Okay, I'll review that with them. Thank you guys for letting me take a little moment. I appreciate it.
You bet. Ms. Johnson, do you have a question for us?
Thank you. Yes, I do. And Daryl, you did answer part of my question earlier in the Q&A about the LPA. I'm currently LSSP, and am very much interested in pursuing the LPA. And so I graduated in 2021. I'm employed as an LSSP, and I have been under the supervision of a LPA and also a psychologist. And so I'm just reading the requirements here from the website, and it does say that, of course, I have to take the EPPP and passage of the jurisprudence exam. Is that in conjunction with the jurisprudence that I've already taken as an LSSP, or is this an additional, I have to take it more than once?
It's the same jurisprudence exam for all. I'm trying to remember now if we, I'm thinking, if I get this wrong, licensing is going to throw rocks at me, but I'm thinking that if you're a current licensee, you've already passed the juris, we don't make you take it again.
Okay, that's what I want to be clear about. And then also the 3,000 postgraduate hours. I've completed my practicum, my internship, and this is going into my second year of as an LSSP in a school district. So all of those hours can be counted or no?
Well, it would, the 3,000 hours has to come after your graduate degree is conferred, and it
Yeah.
has to be under the supervision of a psychologist.
Yes, okay, that's what I wanted to be sure of.
But remember, the 3,000 hours, it's only operative for achieving independent practice authority.
Yeah.
You don't need it to get the LPA license.
Okay, yes, okay. Oh, yeah, I see that on here. Okay, perfect. Okay, those were my questions. So currently I could just go ahead and apply, and then those hours would only come into play if I wanted to work independently.
Correct. Yeah, you would need to, once you had what you thought were 3,000 hours, you could then apply for independent practice authority,
Mhm.
and you would come out from underneath the supervision of a licensed psychologist. But
Absolutely.
again, they've got to come after the conferral of the degree, and they have to be under the supervision of a licensed psychologist.
Absolutely. That's what I gathered from that. So it looks like what I need to do for the LPA currently is take the EPPP for the LPA.
Yeah, you'll have to apply with us first, and then we give you approval to set for that exam. So
Okay.
that's how you get it.
Okay, thank you. That's been very helpful.
You bet.
Thank you.
And if I'm wrong about that jurisprudence exam, the only thing you're going to get is a sorry, and you can throw a rock at me the next time you see me. I don't think I'm wrong, but I might be.
I'm sure hoping you are right about this.
Thanks, Ms. Johnson. Ms. Korf, did you have a question for us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I just had a general question about the compact. So I'm considering joining the SIPAC, but my understanding is that it just really offers you to allow you to do telehealth across state lines, or just a temporary in-person services. So this is great if I was looking at taking a vacation or residing in another state for a while. I guess I'm just kind of weighing the pros and cons of how much this is really worth it versus, because you still have to know all the rules and the laws in this state that you're actually practicing in. So if I go to New Mexico, then I have to know all the rules and it just seems really complicated to me. And I'm just wondering, based on your experiences, have you noticed that this has been a big problem with clinicians practicing in other states and getting complaints against their licensing, and how this has all worked out across with the SIPAC?
I'm going to let Patrick talk about the pros and cons of the telehealth. I mean, telehealth versus temporary in-person practice. I will tell you, as far as complaints or problems, no, it's not a problem. Candidly, what you're going to find is most states are very similar in their ethical standards or their standards of care. Now, where there are some differences are things like duty to disclose, duty to warn, those types of things, child abuse reporting. You would definitely want to know that kind of stuff. But I just can't see anything. I haven't seen anything that says makes me want to wave people off from doing it and going, oh my gosh, there's a landmine there you don't want to step on. I don't even think we've ever had a complaint against the SIPAC.
Okay.
Patrick, have we ever opened a complaint against somebody?
I can't think of one.
Yeah, I don't think we have. And I'm not aware of any of our folks getting in trouble in another jurisdiction. And shoot, there's almost 40 states in this thing that people are eligible to practice in under SIPAC?
40 states and jurisdictions, so they're not all states, but
Right. So
okay.
I don't, if somebody's whispering in your ear that that's dangerous, I don't think there's any data to support that fear, to be honest with you. If there was, you wouldn't have as many people doing this, and we would see a lot more problems. Now I'll shut up. Patrick, you can talk to her about the different options.
yeah, there's 2 authorizations that SIPAC issues. And so if you're a Texas licensed psychologist, you can apply for an APIT or a TAP. And the APIT means if you're physically in Texas, you can deliver telepsychological services to any of the other 39 jurisdictions, to a client located in any of the other 39 jurisdictions. It does not allow you to physically move to you to travel to New Mexico if you're not licensed in New Mexico and that's not your home state with SIPAC, and then deliver services. It's very specific about you have to be in your home state
Okay,
where you're licensed. Now there's the TAP. The APIT is the authority to practice interjurisdictional telepsychology. The TAP is the temporary authority to practice, and that is you can, if you get a TAP, you can physically go to another jurisdiction that's a member and practice temporarily. I think it's up to 30 days in that state. I don't actually think New Mexico is a member, but Arizona is. So if you got a TAP, travel to Arizona and you could practice 30 days under that TAP. But those are the two sorts of authorizations that they issue.
thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
I'll tell you, Doc, one thing we see people get hung up on when they apply for SIPAC is whether or not you come from an APA or CPA accredited degree program. Make sure I'm not asking you here, and I don't need to know, but Patrick and I see a lot of people get hung up on that. They won't let you in. ASPPB won't give you the requisite certificates that you need to apply for authority under SIPAC if you don't come from an APA or a CPA accredited doctoral degree program. So just an FYI.
Yeah.
Don't waste your money if you don't come from one of those.
It's not SIPAC. It says, no, you have to have an e-passport from ASPPB to qualify for SIPAC, and to get the e-passport, you have to have graduated from an APA accredited school. It has to be accredited at the time you graduated as well.
Yes. Very good information. Thank you.
You bet. Happy to help. Ms. Montfort, do you have a question for us?
I did, thanks. I thought I saw on one of the ends of the slides that clinical psychologists will be able to get an LSSP license if they take a course. Did I read that correctly?
I don't know. Patrick and I have written most of those draft rules. I don't remember writing anything like that, but
Yeah, that's not true.
Okay.
No, there was a bill that was filed, but it didn't pass. I know that in the legislature for those that are licensed as psychologists to qualify as LSSPs, but that didn't pass the House, unfortunately. So
correct.
Okay.
And guys, we are coming up on at 2 o'clock, and I've got I need to do a hard stop really at 2 o'clock. Jackie Ashby, do you have a question for us? Jackie? Going once, going twice.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There you go.
Okay, I think Tim has actually answered my question. It was about renewing my LMSW in reference to the, the human trafficking prevention training that you have to do in the process of that renewal. That can be taken, a couple of months before you even start your renewal application, I understand.
Yes.
And the same thing goes for the jurisprudence exam. If I want to take that a couple of months before I actually start my, application.
Yes.
Because it's due the end of October. My actual LMSW renewal is due the end of October.
Yes.
They're both just like continuing education in that regard. You can take them at any point during your renewal cycle. So
okay,
if it's, day 1 or day 720.
Okay, that's what I needed to know. Thank you very much.
And just so you know, we didn't do that human trafficking prevention training to you. That was something that the legislature passed.
I saw that.
That is not a BHEC or a board thing. So none of us did that to you.
Yes, I read that. I remember doing it. I guess it was 2 years ago when I had to renew. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they've made it a recurring requirement. They hadn't changed it to just a one-time deal. So
yeah. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You bet. That's Doris. Is it Naveen Sultan?
Naveen.
Naveen. Okay. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'm an LPC supervisor, and I have a question about the supervision, continuing education, and cultural issues, continuing education. So if you receive a CEU, for example, in a training that addresses both cultural issues and supervision related issues, can that CEU count for both the 3 credits for supervision and the 6 credits? I mean, sorry, the 6 credits for supervision and the 3 for cultural, or do they have to be separate?
So you're wanting to double dip?
Yes, that's the question.
Yeah, I don't think we can do that.
No, okay, all right. Okay, thank you. I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
you bet. Doris, you work in the office with me. You can ask me a question anytime. I'll get to you later. Ms. Jenkins, you have a question for us?
Yes, so I asked it earlier in the chat and then I logged off and it wiped out the previous
Uh-oh.
chat. So I apologize for being redundant. When do the new rules for the licensed psychological associate licensure process go into effect?
Well, that's what we were talking about earlier, in that the rule hasn't been adopted yet. You're gonna have
Okay.
to wait. Yeah, you watch the council's gonna meet on August 15th, and they're gonna take that rule up for discussion and debate then. You'll need to watch that to see if it's actually adopted. And then if it is, it'll, I don't know, it usually takes 20 to 30 days for it to actually go into effect after that.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
You bet. All right, seeing no other hands and it being very, very close to 2 o'clock, I am going to call it a day. I appreciate everybody. We had about 500, we had a little over 500 people that looks like we're attending at one point at the high water mark. I appreciate everybody joining us today, and actually the good questions and the participation that we had. I personally enjoy that when you guys get to question us, get to ask us all these things. It makes us kind of aware of where some of the gray areas or discrepancies are in the rules or on the website. So thanks for taking the time to join us. I apologize for it taking, being here 2 hours, but hey, you got free reign, free access to all of us during that time. So like I say, if you got it, I'm going to send out a email for those of you that were here for, at least an hour or an hour. I'll send out your CEU certificate or email. It's not a certificate. It's just an email with the credit. And then I'm going to send out a separate email with the bills that were attached. And like I said before, it's a snoozer of a read. But if you just want to read those bills and kind of see in more detail what I was talking about, you can download it and take a look at it at your convenience. With that, anything else? Am I missing anything, Sarah, Christina, Diane?
No, all good.
All right. Thank y'all. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.